Welcome back to the benefit session of the forum. Are there any further apologies other than those that were given this morning? And is there anybody here this afternoon who was not here this morning? How about you then, right?
Thank you.
Okay, just again looking at the minutes of the previous meeting in Perth on the 23rd of March. Again, for accuracy, first page 5, page 6, and page 7. Everybody happy that was there, that's a true reflection of what was discussed? I think most of the items will appear again on the latest agenda. Reports from the DWP LAA steering groups. Now, Fraser has left a message with Peter Meehan to try and find out if he's on his way. He indicated to me on Tuesday that he probably wasn't coming, but we've not heard anything to confirm either way, so we'll progress on the assumption at the moment that he's not coming.
I would think if he's not coming, I'll maybe ask him to bring something that will just circulate.
The latest minutes are out.
Sorry?
The latest minutes are out, but only in draft at the moment. So,
what's that off the steering group?
The steering group.
I've got an update. Alan Sinclair, one of my colleagues at Edinburgh, is on the transitional working group for universal credit, so he's given me some highlights on the current situation regarding universal credit, so I'll just run through them. The universal credit local authority pilots, there were 10 notes of interest to COSLA for 2 to 3 6-monthly pilots, so there'll have to be a decision made on who those are, and that's not been done yet. A business change impact analysis roadshow at COSLA on the 25th of June, and that was trying to look at the main issues for local authorities with universal credits. And just quoting for Alan here, there was too much detail at the meeting and the DWP are having a rethink. That's what he's put down.
Yeah, I think it was a particularly well attended event. I don't know if anybody here was at it, maybe one or two faces were at it. And the session in the morning was about really positioning what the model was all about, and looking for local authorities to consider what the biggest impacts for them on the implementation of universal credit was going to be. And they were specifically looking at universal credit. They were acknowledging the fact that there were a lot of other issues and similar welfare reform issues which may be crossing over, but they were wanting to pick out universal credit ones in particular. The group in the afternoon split up into individual sessions, and that's when the detail really became too much. The model was taking you really into too much information on what the impacts might be, and there was a bit of discussion about trying to put some framework around that so local authorities would fill it in at least a semi-consistent manner. So there's been some feedback to Debbie Collins. Debbie is represents the Director of Finance for Borders Council, and she's been really leading in this strand with the liaison with DWP. And there's been a suggestion that they're looking at key headings or key themes that we would be able to talk about the impacts in those key themes. So things that we were talking about, things like migration as a category and what that would mean for us, so working those through. So the next step is going to be further work with Glasgow, Borders and Renfrewshire, who are all involved because of the Directors of Finance involvement in the financial and commercial group, the subgroup that's reporting to Transition Working Group. So those three are going to go away and try a few options and bring something back to the table that hopefully local authorities will be able to complete. The good news is that DWP seem to be really keen to share the outputs from that with COSLA, and that means that we'll get some good information from that as well.
Thank you. Just moving on, some of Alan's comments, and some of these might actually take over. DWP cost modelling pro forma, looking at how LA costs will change with the move to universal credit. Some returns have already been received from Scottish local authorities, and he specifically mentions Edinburgh and Stirling having completed theirs. Decisions need to be taken about which local authority departments will administer the replacement for the social fund. Some authorities are, I'm sure you mentioned it on Tuesday, you're a wee bit further down the line than others on that. You maybe touch on that after we'll go through these. There will be 7 subgroups from the DWP supporting exceptions working group, looking at financial products, budgeting support, payments and exceptions, etc. DWP have received some comments from LAs about face-to-face arrangements under universal credits. A revised paper will be issued at the next transitional working group. Transitional working group received an update on IT at the last meeting, and the DWP claim that everything is on schedule. I've just got 2 exclamation marks after the schedule. During phase 2 of migration to universal credits, transitional protection will need to be calculated manually, at least initially, as the IT will not be able to do it automatically. That'll be nice and straightforward for everybody. And Lord Freud will be visiting Edinburgh and Dunedin Canmore on the 11th of July regarding the demonstration project. So that was Alan's update on the transitional working group. It's maybe worth just going back to the item that he mentioned on the social fund and where everybody is on that. And Sheila, you had mentioned on Tuesday you're taking that and financing. Yeah.
The view of our social work colleagues is they don't want to touch it with a barge pole, basically. But we're slightly different in Highland in that our adult services have gone to NHS and children's services have come to the council. So if it was to come to social work in Highland, it would go to NHS, who would then subcontract it back to Revs and Bens. So the solution that seems to be on the table at the moment in Highland is that it would just come straight to Revs and Bens. No political buy-in to that yet.
Anybody else made the decision?
Well, sorry, if I could just add to that, I think the Association of Directors of Social Work have also said that basically they don't want to administer it. That was certainly the advice that was given at the design group in Edinburgh.
Okay. Anybody else made a decision yet? No.
Decided I can't get rid of it. Try as I might, nobody else wants it.
Well, it's an interesting statement for Dawson there about the directors of social work coming with that decision. So that maybe pushes it one way or another.
Who here then is you had to nominate from that group with COSLA, you would have to be a key representative for your local authority? I know I got my name put forward.
The one that we put forward was a guy who works as a policy officer in corporate services, and he's actually leading welfare reform within the council. So he's the key contact, but there is going to be a group with housing, social work and finance to get together to look at how we deliver it jointly. I mean, I certainly see finance as the payment, the reconciliation type thing on it, at the least. And if there is a framework and it's, you're just giving somebody money because there's not got any money to put in their electric meter or whatever, that's okay. But I'm worried about how you would assess vulnerable people, because I don't, certainly, there's no skills like that in finance at the moment, so social work are going to have to be involved in that.
Now, of course, they wouldn't put anybody forward for the group or an internal group. They have just the fact that, but they would also say, wash their hands of it. And remembering that from the last thing on Tuesday, that the payment might be cash, but it could also be goods or services. Now, we have no background in providing goods, food vouchers and setting all that up for April.
I know that's something that the design group are looking at. They're going to consider that as an avenue of work, as the alternative to cash. Yeah.
I mean, the real issue is you're going to have some kind of software system in which that you're going to have to record the information, and until you make a decision, you don't know how you're going to move forward with that. But also, we need the framework from the Scottish Government on what it's going to be, so that we can participate.
June Deans from Glasgow City Council. The social fund discussion with Scottish Government seems to be ongoing. I think they've set up a group to consider how to deliver that, and they're looking at really the system side of things, and I think they need to think about something more than just an assumption that they might be making at this stage, which is the revenues and benefit systems will carry us. I don't think that's necessarily the right assumption. Certainly there's discussion going on about that being held in other places, for example in social work systems or in a simple payment system, so whatever your corporate payment system is, that might be the way to deal with these payments to get them out. Obviously that doesn't deal with the administration side, but wherever it sits, there's going to be costs associated with software development, even if it's not revenues benefits, and I don't think the Scottish Government can make that assumption. So I've put some questions to that group. I can't attend, it's due to be on the 9th of July I think, and we're hoping to send someone along to the group. I don't know how the invitations have been put together though. Interesting to see what comes from that.
It's a major part of expenditure though. If you look at the figures that we're given, 20 to 25 million pounds per annum paid out. So it's not an insignificant thing, and I've got real concerns about the Scottish Government's ability to deliver this in time for a system to have in April, whether making assumptions like they'll give us the regulations in October and we'll have a system in place by December that can trial between January and March. Just
No, everything else is going on.
no. Sure.
Scottish Government, Sheila McCandy, Highland Council. Scottish Government emailed a few people, I think it was yesterday, inviting us to a meeting next week to do the IT specification. But there's no confirmation yet about the date of the meeting unless it's come in today. I don't know, but they were talking about Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So I don't know, I haven't heard any more about that, but that will be looking at the IT specification.
I think it might be useful, given that certainly some authorities have already made the decision, but others will be making it in the next few months, no doubt, that we put that in as a separate item on the agenda for the next meeting, and hopefully we'll have decisions will have been made in the most authorities at that stage, because it might become a topic within the benefits agenda for a number of the authorities, if not all of us, in the future. June, could you give us any other updates?
Can I say one last thing about anybody ever here worked in the DWP and dealt with crisis loans? Because the reason they have security screens and security guards in the DWP offices is primarily because of crisis loans, and this is what you're going to be facing. Basically, we're getting the rubbish to deal with. You're going to have universal credit coming in, all these welfare reform cuts. People are not going to have money, and then they're going to be signposted back to the local authority to get a crisis loan when you've got no money. If you can avoid it, I would suggest that you don't want to touch this with a barge pole.
Yeah, but the council's not.
Somebody has to do it.
So it doesn't matter, which frontline services that provides it. It's still council staff that are going to be at risk, but they're not currently at risk.
Customer services staff, they're doing it. Sorry.
There's a lot of people with razor with spotlight faces. There's no way of changing that tape, though, is there?
But there's a lot to be said that obviously we're not the DWP, we will not have screens up, and we'll find that we'll deal with these customers a lot better.
Take whatever you want.
Don't let any customer services staff hear the second part. Okay, June, could you just give us an update on anything else from the DWP steering groups and whatnot?
Yeah, fine. I'll start with the practitioner officer group. The meeting in June was postponed because there was not enough on the agenda, which I thought was amazing. but the next meeting is due for next week, so 4th of July I think, and we just got the agenda in yesterday for that, and on the agenda is benefit cap, which is obviously something that's pretty important, and we're looking for some real progress on that, and the agenda's been subdivided into April 2013 design, which I think is probably really how they're going to implement that, and I'm hoping to hear from that some practical arrangements really starting to come through about how things are actually going to work. Also the split of data sharing and future scans and additional burdens. So for data sharing, we had to explain to them that there was a special POG for benefit cap probably about March time, and what we did at that point was explain to them what we thought we would require from DWP to be able to apply the cap, and they were away to consider what they could actually deliver to us. The expectation, I think, at that point was that they were going to tell us how much was left to pay, so that if the cap is going to be applied, the DWP will advise us how much is left to pay out in housing benefit, and it'll be a straightforward thing. We would just make that adjustment in our systems, which would need to be amended to be able to do that. A lot of discussion on notification, what the notification was going to contain, and what was going to be the required wording around appeals, because obviously the benefit cap, the appeal against the benefit cap can't really be appeal against local authority. It's a DWP decision to apply the cap, so again waiting on clarification to see what's actually coming through from that. And how to exchange information, I think it's going to be really important. You'll know from the scan, if you've looked at the scan information that you had already, that a lot of that was really not that helpful because it was very old. That worries me going forward into the live situation. If DWP are relying on our monthly scan for their assessment of the benefit cap, then I think we've got an issue, because immediately we've done that scan. In fact, before the scan goes out the door, it's out of date for us, and I think we would be looking for some kind of exchange in between there, but I don't know if it's going to be that sophisticated. We'll ask some questions next week about that. Additional burdens, not sure what they mean there. Obviously that's the kind of terminology that's been used for any extra cost to local authorities in administering this, and I think we'll just need to see what they've got to say about that. But a real area where there's still a lot of uncertainty, and also in terms of system design, whether we're going to get things delivered on time. Obviously software suppliers know they're going to have to deliver this, but I know that I haven't seen much in the way of detail on how our software is going to be amended to be able to apply the benefit cap. So if anybody's got any kind of comments for me to take with me next week, in addition to anything I've mentioned there, then let me know, because it may be that we haven't thought of all the angles. So just keep us advised. Other things on the agenda, CIS and slow running. I think there has been, if you're close to the process, and you'll be aware there's been a lot of issues in CIS, so I guess what we're going to get is some kind of an explanation of what's been happening there. It's just an agenda heading, and I think it's been a really big issue recently. And also there is the CTB new scheme and the associated DWP product amendment is how they've put it. So presumably that might be a wee bit about data sharing, or how we actually take universal credit or whatever into account for new schemes. We'll see what that is. So that is the agenda for next week. It's pretty light, and I was expecting maybe something on supported accommodation to be in there. I certainly asked a couple of questions about that. You'll be aware last year the consultation that was out on supported accommodation doesn't seem to have reported back anything yet, and we're waiting to hear. I know that there was a question in its steering group about that, and it's going to be on the next agenda for steering group as well, so there's some information coming through about that, but we're not, again, we don't know what the detail of that's going to be. The answer I got back to the question that I put to the person who'd done consultation was that they were still considering how supported accommodation would be dealt with going forward. Now, there's a real big risk in here for budgeting, within your local authority for supported and temporary accommodation next year if we don't understand whether or not the supported accommodation element is going to be taken away out of housing benefit again. If that's the case and that's the way things go, then we're back to thinking about how we split rent charges and how we apportion the rent charges between a supported or temporary costs and the actual rent element. I think there's some real risks in there that we don't really understand, and we can't do anything about planning for until we understand what the split of the supported accommodation, temporary accommodation is. So I'll be certainly asking and any other business question on that next week when I go along to the meeting. So again, if anyone has any particular things that they're interested in asking about, then I can take that forward.
Can I maybe ask June, I'm assuming at the moment that supported accommodation is not subject to the benefit cap.
I don't think we can. That was one of the questions I asked, and the answer to go back to that would be it's not being excluded from the benefit cap.
And I mean that's a big issue.
Yep.
Sorry, I did notice that there was an answer at the steering group that there was no answer, but Peter made his own comment that from his feelings that he felt for temporary accommodation, not supported accommodation, that the DWP were minded just to go to LHA plus a £60 management cost across the board, and that's what they were going to implement. But he did have that confirmed. But supported accommodation is a total different barrel of fish because they don't want to be touching the exempt supported accommodation type. And his feeling was that when we talk about it might just be retained by local authorities and held out with universal credit altogether.
Anything else, June?
Yes. That's probably the kind of non-welfare reform agenda. So we've probably just stuff to just remind people about, really, you know it's all happening, but just to make sure that you're going to be seeing it soon under social sector size criteria. Is that the right terminology? Yeah. I always want to call this something different.
Bedroom tax.
Bedroom tax, no, I can possibly call it that. The DWP have got some draft guidance out, which they've got out to people for comments and things back. So I'm expecting to see something coming through fairly soon on that, although I don't know when. So again, we'll ask questions about dates. And you'll be aware of the really short titled Social Security brackets information sharing in relation to welfare reform services, etc. regulations, which is the data sharing information, and there's a draft circular doing the rounds just now, so I think they're talking about early July for a circular for advice and guidance on those regulations, which come into effect from the 2nd of July. I think they were trying to get them in place for then, but I think the feedback's not due till the 4th. So just to be aware of keeping your eyes open for that circular coming in. I think that's going to be really important in how we tackle our business of data sharing right now. We're not necessarily waiting for other welfare reforms to happen before we start doing this. So I think it would be really useful to have those additional permissions to share data. And I was thinking if there was anything else on universal credit. Yes, there was under migration for universal credit. There have been some workshops, some that have taken place, some that are still to take place. One that I attended last week was a workshop on pension credit migration. That was pretty interesting stuff. The DWP seem to be quite advanced in their thinking for pension credit migration now, and we'll be coming to. They're away working on models, so there's nothing to share in terms of detail really. But they are obviously looking a year behind universal credit implementation, talking about migrating from October 2014 to 2017. And the impression that I get is they want to do things, in fact they stated that they want to do this in a way that causes the least disturbance and the least number of inquiries from pensioners, because obviously that's a fairly steady caseload. They are looking at the profile and makeup of the the caseload to work out the best way of migrating cases across, and I expect it will be a steady stream throughout the whole 3 or 4 year period that's left in there to get us to 2017. And I do get the impression that they will come and speak to each individual local authority about the detail of view of migration, but they're pretty conscious themselves that they need to fit in with the overall migration to universal credit, and that is going to have a slightly different look and feel to a nice steady migration pension cases, so they might have to just move that around a bit to fit in with the universal credit migration. And I guess we'll just see how that works through. There's a further workshop I think being set up on the universal credit migration and the planned element of that, and I guess just different ways of looking at that seem to come to the surface each time you're talking to somebody different. Certainly the last understanding that I'd had about it was that there was going to be a focus on potentially smaller authorities first of all, moving towards larger authorities, but most recent papers we've had seem to suggest there's maybe a wee bit more flexibility in that, and I guess we would like to see that. I don't know if anybody, any local authorities have been approached directly by DWP. We certainly haven't about immigration to universal credit and the planned element of it. But I would expect that a programme for that to be happening at some point as well, and it can't really wait that far. We need to start understanding the impact of our planned migration fairly soon, I think. And anything else? There was one other area on face-to-face stuff that's gone a bit quiet. There was Dawson and myself have been attending the face-to-face workshops, and the most recent thing that was shared was the National Service Framework draft for provisional face-to-face services. I think that was shared right across the Transition Working Group representatives, and feedback asked for. There was feedback that came from all sorts of different authorities that weren't involved necessarily in the face-to-face group, and since that it's gone a bit quiet. We're expecting to have a further conference call type session following that framework being issued, but that hasn't happened yet. We'll see where that goes from now. And there are another set of workshops in a similar area which are just coming up, and we're talking to COSLA about who can attend those, and they are looking at the local authority dimension within the target operating model. So it's all starting to pull together, but there's so many strands that they each got their own momentum, and I think there's a real issue with actually getting the right representation from local authorities right across the whole country at these meetings moving forward. Okay.
Thanks very much, Jane.
Jane, can I just ask a question? So you're talking about face-to-face. It was something Eugene brought up on Monday, was the fact that we local authorities are saying that we're preparing for maybe the face-to-face element, but he raised the issue about, well, the DWP might be commissioning for this. So I don't know if there was any discussions that, well, we might be planning, right, okay, we need to retain so many staff for commissioning, but then we might have to be going on a tender against the third sector or whatever to actually provide that.
Good question. I don't know the answer. I think the DWP face-to-face strategic design group, I think is probably the right term, was happening and had its own kind of agenda at the same time as the local authority associations, particularly in England, were lobbying to say there's a role for local authorities. And the local authorities, in conjunction with DWP, came up with a suggestion to go with the local authority-led pilots. And the two things that are moving along together and separately, Les. So certainly at the last time we met in person with the face-to-face group, we asked about what about the local authority-led pilots, how do they fit in with this? And the kind of the view back was really, well, they're happening alongside. It's just, it seems to be the project management methodology is allowing for that to happen, and then at a later point the target operating model seems to then want to bring it all together and piece it all together into a whole product. So I guess we wait and see. I think what the local authority pilots will do will show local authorities capacity, ability to provide face-to-face services. The actual provision of those services will be coming from the National Service Framework, which is a strategic level document which describes face-to-face services being a national provision with local elements. And there's a little bit of information on how those services might be put together in commissions mentioned, but it doesn't say the detail of that, the actual practical application.
That document says the national provision and the local provision, but it's the same thing. The customer support budget and etc. is on the national one provided by theoretically the job centres, and the local one theoretically provided by, but we're providing the same thing.
Post office are going to be quite severely competing for that business.
I don't know. I actually don't think local authorities will have much of a role on the universal credit, apart from taking all the fallout when people don't have any money. You get crisis loans.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I can comment on that. I don't think either June or I have problems with the national framework and the strategic bit of it. It's when it comes to how that will operate at the lower level. I mean, the local authority role essentially is seen by DWP as providing local flexibility where it's needed. I mean, there's another way of maybe interpreting that. It's maybe, we're there as almost as the ambulance service picking up the pieces. We are providing mitigation for some of the worst effects, of what might happen. So it's, just to kind of reinforce the point, the strategy is fine, and it does provide for including local authorities on helping people to get online assistance, financial inclusion, all these things that were mentioned in the slides at the recent presentation. But whether at the end of the day we're going to be marginalised or whether we're actually going to be partners in it, just remains to be seen. What I don't see though is in certain parts of the country, where DWP either don't have a presence or have an inadequate presence, if they're following the best value model, it would be inefficient to do other than to actually have the local authority as a partner. But there's another aspect to this. There's the provision of the services at the beginning, in the first couple of years of universal credit, but there's another agenda which is to widen, the DWP and government are going to widen their study of all of this, and they are going to look at other providers and other ways of delivering and so on. And there's a danger in that, I think, for local authorities. Unless local authorities can get in first and prove themselves both in terms of capability and capacity, and that of course is what the pilots are intended to do. England's a wee bit further ahead than we are in Scotland, and in Scotland, there probably will only be 3 pilots chosen at the end of the day. It's really important that COSLA choose, the functionality, they choose these pilots well, because this is how Scotland is showcasing, what we're capable of doing.
Okay, thanks everybody for all that.
Next on the agenda is ATLAS. Now, Fraser did mention when he was speaking about the Training Officers Forum that as an offshoot of that there was a meeting hosted up in Perth on the 1st of June where the authorities got together to discuss their various problems. Peter took a paper that came out of that to DWP, and if anybody was there on Tuesday, he did comment that having DWP, of course, think it all works fantastically well, and it does for them, and there's lots of savings. But Peter raised the issues that Scottish authorities are having, and on the back of him raising that, the English and the Welsh authorities followed on with their own issues. So the next step is, as Fraser mentioned, a meeting with DWP either in Edinburgh or Glasgow. A date still to be set?
Well, basically I think the position at the minute is Peter's going back to DWP to get dates off of them, and then it'll be
arrange from that.
So, I suppose make sure you're represented if you've got any issues on Atlas. And other than that, is there much anybody else has to say about it at the moment, or should we wait the outcome of that meeting?
Anybody considering turning it off? I wasn't laughing when I said that. I'm actually actively thinking that we're not resourced to actually. Now, we've got the issue where Atlas is almost equivalent to our mail coming in, and Atlas are about the same. And figure-wise, I've not got double the staff to deal with it. Software suppliers have provided software which facilitates automation, but we can't automate because we've got issues with our software, we've got issues with the data. And at the moment, I'm probably putting about 20% of all my benefit process resource into that, offering overtime, which I can't work because CIS is constantly down at the weekends. And it's just becoming to the point where we're saying, well, we're going to get in such a backlog with this, with our mail, is it better just turn off Atlas for a period of 6 months or 3 months to allow us to catch up with our mail and then just turn it back on again. Don't load the files. Or is that just a bit too...
Hi Liz, June Deans again. I don't think we're intending to turn it off. I think there's got to be something that we can do in terms of improving the levels of automation and things, and hopefully that's something that will come from the discussions that we have with DWP, but the suppliers need to be involved in those as well to an extent, and that's hard to do, to get a consistent approach to that. We've not got any intention of turning it off, but we did have a significant issue this week, and I'm just wondering if others had it, or maybe just this, again, it's maybe a scale thing for us. Those DLA changes, the attendance allowance changes, were coming through for us and with no information on them, so just whole series of records being created in the system that we had to, we then have to do something with, but they're not carrying any data. So that's all been reported back, but I hadn't heard anything to say that had been resolved, or if anybody else was seeing the same issue coming through. I mean, we're talking hundreds and thousands of cases. Don't know if anyone else has seen it. Something to watch out for then.
These raised an issue, but our software says we have to give it back to us first, because we have to check to make sure we're interpreting the data correctly before we can go back to LAS to say there's a problem with Atlas. And that's another issue. We don't know who to, if you've got an error, who's actually the fault. Is it your software supplier, or is it the actual data itself?
Lorna Campbell, Dumfries and Galloway. We've certainly we have not considered switching it off, but we actually have gone down the route of actually purchasing, well, it's not software, expertise to build into the system to deal with it, because it's crippling us work-wise, so it is, but I'm paying out in overtime. We're costing it and buying expertise, which is supposedly to deal with 75% of the work that's coming in, but that's an early testing phase. It's not live yet, so we'll wait and see if it.
That's only available for Northgate.
Northgate, yeah, that's capacity grid.
It's a case of the private sector hub sites, and Atlas is crippling them well, so they put the technical resource in to build a product that will automate 75% of your Atlas if you're on that. I was made aware of that, but we're on the wrong Northgate product.
Next one's been on for a while. I'm not sure if it really needs to stay on as such. I think we've got enough issues with it. I'm not saying the economic downturn has upturned, but I think what's affecting us probably more now are things like Atlas and whatever. So unless anybody's got any comments on that one, just take that one off the agenda in the future. Subsidy claim issues, again, you're probably just going through your audit at the moment, so unless anybody's got any outstanding issues from last year's subsidy claim in Clackmannan. Well,
I've got an issue with this year's audit.
Alright.
That 40 plus testing. We've got obviously our auditor's changed this year after the 5 years, and our audit has nearly complete. They have found one error because we've wrongly categorised a pre-89 tenancy instead of a tenancy of a registered social landlord. Makes no difference, it goes into 100% sales, but we have to go through. But what they've come back and said is, you had 3 errors last year, even though they've been accepted by the DWP, because they haven't come up in their 20 sampling, they want 40 plus sampling on last year's errors, and I've refused to do it, saying said, well, wait a second, I've already done 40 plus testing and gave them the results. Yeah, but that's last year, I want it on this year. So we have to go away, so for anything that you've maybe found was found in last year's subsidy, if they don't come across that in their small test, they'll ask you to do 40 plus testing on previous year's errors. And I've tried to raise that with Owen, but Owen's not got back to me yet. I don't think that's very a good use of resource, considering the total overpayments was less than £5,000. That we're going to have to go back and do 40 plus testing on the 5 errors that we had last year as well. I don't know if anybody else has found that, or if it's just a...
We have. We've just done it. We've just done it.
That's just that would be another 200 cases, that's another member of staff for a day. So I've raised it as it is, and nobody else has got that far down the line yet. Alicia? No. Okay. Seem to be doing an awful lot of moaning sitting at this top table. I'm going to go back in the body.
I'm not letting you be secretary again. Replacement for council tax benefit, or council tax reduction, as it's now called. As anybody who was there on Tuesday, where it was revealed on Tuesday, the council tax reduction scheme. Now, the only things I know about was we met again, Software Suppliers Group met with Scottish Government, a number of local authorities were represented as well, and we spoke about the creation of the regulations. They've gone away and created regs, and a number of authorities are involved in going through the draft regs at the moment. 1 or 2 authorities are involved in going through the draft regs.
June. They'll just go away.
Hi, June Teams again. I'm going to be saying a lot today. I didn't go through the draft regs, and just to sort of dispel that kind of myth, because they weren't actually made available to us to take away, and they weren't complete. What they've got is the Scottish Government did set up a session which at COSLA's request, where myself and Brian Murphy from Edinburgh went along to really answer a series of questions that they've been asking. I think they've been asking a few different people anyway for views on things, which is good. But to deal with some of the questions that were concerning them, for me, a lot of what they were asking were kind of not low level things, but things that weren't really high volume, big scale, which is possible. So we didn't take the opportunity or get the opportunity, or nor would I actually want the opportunity of starting at page 1 and going through all the regs, because I think that would be really difficult to do and actually give some constructive feedback on that. But we did raise with them some areas of concern to make sure that they were covered, in big key important things like how do we manage the transition from CTB into council tax reduction and those kind of things. And there was a further meeting, a joint officer meeting last week, which unfortunately I couldn't attend. And at that meeting they took away those areas again to come back with. We'd originally, a few weeks ago, even up to a few weeks ago, were expecting the regulations to be available to us this side of the summer, but that's definitely not going to happen now. It's going to be after the recess before we get to see these, I think. So generally positive. They're going to look quite similar. They're using the existing CTB regulations as a base, so they'll look similar. But what they're doing is they're taking out any references, obviously, to any other welfare benefits. So all the references to Social Security Acts and all that kind of thing are being incorporated into the new regulations. So it'll be a complete set of regs. So that'll make it quite different. They did share with us their contents page and their headers there, and it looks like it's going in the right direction. I think we just need to hope that we'll get a little bit of chance to see the final version and any comments there. But it's a fairly big task they've got. I think the only thing I'm thankful about is that as an individual local authority we're not having to do that for ourselves, which is what's happening in every else, as you know. So at least that's a positive from that piece of work's point of view.
And again, as Fraser mentioned in the morning session, they have asked to meet with the Software Suppliers Group again, and that's will be arranged for the start of August. So they are engaging as early, to be fair to them, as they can with the software suppliers as well. reports from the various groups. SLEG, is there a SLEG report? You want to take the...
There's a wait hand to you, sure. Oh, sorry, my apologies. I just hand you the mic.
Aye, no bother. Ali McGregor from Highland Council. Main points from regarding the SLEG. Wilman Knowles she did a presentation on tax credit investigations. As you know, tax credit overpayments are not part of our current investigations, or they're not incorporated in any sanction of any kind. So HMRC and DWP have got together, and they are currently working on these cases to take tax credits forward as part of a sanctionable offence. At present, the DWP are taking the lead in these cases. In fact, the HMRC are not going to be physically part of the investigation at all. They're just providing the information from their systems, which is nice. And they are at the interview under caution stage. We are being allowed to be part of the investigation, but we are not allowed to take the lead in these cases. It is purely a HMRC and DWP joint working. I don't know if that will change or not, but that's what it's like at the moment. Andy McLean from North Lanarkshire Council has asked me to state the following regarding that. There's legal debate between DWP and HMRC as to who can investigate tax credit investigations now that the Welfare Reform Act covers it from the 6th of June 2012. Our argument is that LAs cannot investigate tax credit cases as we are not yet part of the agreement between the DWP and HMRC. Therefore, we cannot investigate tax credit cases until the single fraud team is created. But as we will still be LA staff in the future, further arrangements or further agreements have to be made, because we would need to be seconded to the DWP in order to be covered by these regulations. LAs would then be at a disadvantage if it ever came to a selection criteria for single fraud team in 2015, which I'll talk about later. They will be excluded from being able to lead tax credit investigations, even when our standard caseload is probably where the majority of tax credits are being paid. Regards, Andy. So the HMRC overpayments are now going to be taken on board when it comes to sanctions, and we'll just have to see how that pans out. We've started doing a few ourselves already as second chair, and I'm sure other authorities will be doing the same. So, okay, so that's that part. The Single Fraud Investigation Service was the next part. There was a presentation by David Mulligan and David Ward. They're part of the project team. And basically the plans for the Single Fraud Investigation Service have begun to move forward at a fairly rapid pace. LA staff fraud investigation staff will join Single Fraud Investigation Service, and they will remain as LA staff between 2013 and 2015. After that, they haven't told us what's happening yet. The implication of the new system was penciled in for April 2013. They've dropped the April part. It's 2013 now. Although there's pilots ongoing regarding systems and other various things in the background. So if the systems are ready, then they're going to go for the April 2013. Talking about various systems and pilots. There's been pilots started off at the moment regarding things I'll talk about in a minute, but they're looking at pilots between July and October as the part for pilots, and then they're going to start moulding the system, or moulding a single fraud team a little bit more from that. Steering groups have been meeting throughout the last couple of months. and the steering groups are looking at co-location and minimum standards and IUCs and all different types of investigation work. We've had a meeting ourselves yesterday with the Fraud Investigation Service up here, and we're beginning to move that forward regarding ourselves. We've got good working relationships with them already, so that's going forward. So we're looking at co-location up here as a pilot, and we obviously agreed the minimum standard side of things already too. So day-to-day referrals of investigations was also discussed within the single fraud, and interviews under caution. These will all be subject to different types of pilots, so the case of watch this space, including decision making, various types of pilots. Quick wins was obviously part of the discussion as well. That includes the co-location part of it. So there are different authorities looking at these at the moment. As I said, we're starting a pilot soon. East Ayrshire have got one, and Glasgow have begun pilots or starting pilots shortly. So they're looking at these documents, the minimum standards documents and other documents being good starting blocks for the beginning of single fraud investigation service. So again, it's a case of just watch this space. Communication strategy as well was a document that was discussed, again regarding it's basically documentation or communication between LAs and the DWP in respect of the single fraud team, and we hope to have more information from them as and when it comes. They're coming to the SLAIG again in August, so we'll have more of an update then as to what's happening. And so that's really about that bit. There was the question was asked regarding LA overpayments. DWP pass lower claims to compliance, and basically it was asked if LAs had a local arrangement in place to transfer cases directly to DWP. Most of the local authorities said no in that circumstances. HBMS was discussed, in particular the Credit Reference Agency cases. Quite a lot of the local authorities seem to be not taking this on at the moment. There's been errors or problems with the HBMS data matches with ourselves. I don't know about everybody else, but there seems to have been quite major problems with the data that's been provided, so they're looking at that at the moment as well. SOG, Carol McNeil. No minutes were available from the last meeting due to basically there's ongoing work with Single Fraud Investigation Service, so they seem to be channeling their focus on that at the moment. So there was nothing to declare from that meeting. It was the same situation with the joint team. The focus for the joint team will now be working towards Single Fraud Investigation Service, supporting both LAs and the DWP fraud teams. The National Anti-Fraud Network, the same situation again. Single Fraud Investigation Service has basically affected the whole NAFIN. Position with the staff employed within NAFIN is unclear, and Jeff Jennings is meeting with the DWP to try and establish if teams have a place once the Single Fraud Investigation Service is in place. Just for your information, their AGM, the NAFIN AGM, is in November 2012, and no other matters are raised under any other business, and the next meeting is in February. No, it's not. It's in August. Friday the 31st August, and it's going to be in Aberdeenshire Council. So that.
Oh yeah, okay, sure.
Sheila McCandy, Highland Council. I was just going to add one thing to what Ali has said there. At our meeting yesterday with DWP, we asked the question when we would get the tax credit training to enable us to be second chair in these interviews, and the response we got from DWP was we had it at Sligo. So in case any of you were at Sligo or your colleagues were at Sligo, the presentation we received at Sligo was our training. So don't be seeking any further training, because that is it. To me, it wasn't training at all. It was a presentation about how it has gone so far with HMRC. But DWP confirmed yesterday that's the training.
Can I just ask, are we discussing CFIS under the agenda later on?
We can pick it up now.
Just a question on when the transfer over happens in April, what was the talk about systems? Are you going to Framis, or can I, because I have to give a year's notice to get out of my contract for the fraud system, so I'm looking for sort of surety when I can actually go to my supplier and say, look, I don't want to pay my £5,000 a year maintenance. Nothing.
The systems didn't mention anything at all about system names, what they're going to be using. Iris was mentioned briefly, but there was no further information about what they're planning or what they've got.
Confirmed that yesterday.
Iris is not.
Is not.
Okay, anything else on the Single Fraud Investigation Service? So we'll just take that at this point. Okay.
It has been confirmed though that it's all staff. Previously it was just investigation staff, but it's now all staff involved in the investigation of fraud. It is, yeah, including managers and including admin staff. They all go to transfer.
Well, between 2013
and then you can apply.
And then after that.
Is anybody, just as an aside, is anybody, sorry I know, it's only 2 o'clock, has anybody looked at setting up a corporate fraud team? CFIS came along right after we got approved by council that we were merging fraud and audit into a corporate fraud and audit team, which meant that all the fraud staff have now went back via their union to say we don't want to be part of this new team because it'll stand us, if we go corporately we will not transfer to CFIS, and we see better career opportunities under CFIS than they do under the council. Just anybody else? I was looking at Stirling because I know that their fraud's already in audit, and we tend to copy them. So, prepare for shared services. Nobody else looking at a corporate fraud team, or considering how you're going to investigate fraud under local council tax support? No? Because it has been confirmed that the CFIS will not investigate local council tax support. That's not part of CFIS's remit. Well, that's what came up for the. Yeah, certainly it's not going to be part of that. So how are you going to? We'll have to again give consideration that if all our fraud staff are going to be taken out, who's going to be left to actually carry out any investigations you require? Who's going to be left to do NFI? And also, who's going to be left to do things like your HPMS? At the moment, our fraud team deal with all that, but a lot of it should be really in housing benefit. It's all these things we'll have to consider, which are going to, as well as all the other things we'll have to consider for next April. Just these little things, or the thing about local council tax support, because what we got here for Robin, it's going to be more key because the budget's fixed. It's our council tax base. It's council's cash that are going to be affected by people fraudulently claiming it. So it might be worth putting a resource in or retaining some sort of resource. Yes.
Anyway. So I have a bit of difficulty in treating a council tax reduction differently from a discount and exemption fraud. So I think I would want to look at them as a whole rather than deal with discounts and exemption in one manner and council tax reductions in a different manner.
But I think if you look at what's happening down south, people are actually getting taken to court for discount fraud as well now. And I think that's. Well, it could be criminal. You could certainly, if somebody's clearly made a false claim for a discount, you could take them, even though there's no legislation, you could take them under common law fraud. I know our fraud team are looking to add that to the charge, but then the fiscal went, no, it's okay. Because we accept discounts by telephone.
I don't think we can just look at things that
I actually toying with the idea, if we bring in the long-term empties, we're going to need an enforcement officer or something to inquire about that. Why don't we just have one post that covers both? And let the long-term empty fund pay for it.
Okay. Appeals Practitioners Group.
That is yet to meet this year. I have an outstanding call out to John Harding, who's the chair, to sort of get it resolved. But we will certainly be meeting. I suspect it will be into the autumn now. But certainly I'll be in touch with John regarding that.
Okay. And any other benefits business? Okay. Fraser, nothing else to add?
Well, as it's virtually the same audience as this morning, I will not bore you all rigid with yet another plug for the IRRB Scottish Conference.
And same, the next meeting is the 27th of September. And other than that, it just remains for me, first of all, to thank Highland Council, and in particular Dawson and Sheila, for their hospitality and arranging this venue. Thank all of you who travelled for coming here today. So you now experience what Highland have to experience every other week. And regardless of whether you're travelling by train or car or plane, have a safe journey. Thank you.